Welcome to Talking True Crime, our new online true crime series where we create an environment for experts in the field to come and discuss the weird and fascinating world of true crime. If you like this episode, please do like, comment and share, and we look forward to bringing the rest of the series to you very soon. But first, to kickstart things, we are joined by the lovely Emma Kenny, psychologist, presenter, writer and expert commentator. So how are you, Emma? Thank you for joining us.
Very well, thanks for that introduction. Very nice.
Very welcome. So we're most recently familiar with you from the series The Killer in My Family, which aired earlier this year on Really. As the lead psychologist and commentator on the show, what are your research tactics?
I mean, my research tactics go from the obvious, which is just reading about things in the press, because the reality is that every story that's ever been told in the last 20 years is online, but it can go as deep and as cerebral as reading court notes. Also, in certain series, I've spoken to family members. So it's about gathering as much information, both from the obvious mainstream right through to court reports and individual interviews. The great thing these days, which is unusual and is new for me, is that we often have an opportunity to look at police interviews because they're recorded now. So for due diligence, we actually get to see the way the interviewers are handled, and that's really important, to watch the person, their body language, and get a gauge of how they were feeling and thinking during that experience. So that would be all of those together.
Yeah, I guess you can get quite a lot actually from, as you say, someone's body language and I guess the way they respond to questioning and that kind of thing.
Well, I think what's different is it used to be such a closed shop. So even if you were working with somebody who is a victim of crime or indeed a criminal, you would have a monolithic experience to some degree of that engagement. Nowadays, it's like you get to see it from all angles. So it's hard not creating assumptions when you read things in the press, because there's always a slant, a story on it. But when you actually see the individual and the way that it unfolds when they're being given an interview, and particularly when you're looking at several interviews, because you have to remember that most people are brought in initially for questioning, and then they might have periods of time where they're brought in again before they're actually questioned as a suspect. And that, again, leverages your understanding of exactly what happened and why what happened occurred.
Yeah, excellent. So the Killer in My Family series, which we had earlier this year, featured killers that were obviously very notorious, so Fred West, Richard Ramirez, Ian Huntley, just to name a few of them. Of the cases that featured on the show, which of those troubled you the most, I guess, when you were looking into the background?
I mean, I wouldn't have invited any of them as a first choice for a Sunday lunch.
Of course.
They all are as horrific as each other, because the reality is that they took people's lives and they did it in the most hideous of ways. I suppose when you think about the ones that make me go even more cold when I imagine the final moments of the victims, Richard Ramirez, Night Stalker, purely because of the randomness of his attacks. And also historically, when you look at what created him, there were some really substantial stepping stones that developed Richard Ramirez. Often when you look back at somebody's life, let's say Fred West. Fred West is somebody that we can identify had at least 2 very serious head injuries. Now, head injuries are absolutely linked organically to an impairment in the brain where somebody's behaviour changes. So you can kind of look and say, okay, fundamentally, West was formed by an ingredients list of possibility. Ramirez wasn't in the same ballpark in the context that there didn't appear to be what we would consider a brain injury, but he seemed to coexist with people around him who enjoyed the macabre. Instead of it repulsing him, we see that from a really early age, he was engaged with it, he enjoyed it. So in nature, I would never say that you can say an individual is born evil or born bad. I think there's a temperament, though, that we're born with. And if that temperament has psychopathic traits, and then you activate it through experience and relationships and conversations and exposure, we can say that that individual to some degree was born with a tenacity for killing. And that's what he and Levi Belfield, I would argue, also would fit that characteristic.
Yeah, so interestingly, I guess that plays a lot into the nature versus nurture argument that is often brought up when discussing people that commit these sort of heinous crimes, and whether there is one leaning towards one or the other.
I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I've done massive research into the nature-nurture debate over psychopathy, for example. What I will say is this. Personally, we live in a moral society. We have a moral code, and thank goodness we do. We live by a set and series of rules and expectations that should we stray from those, we will be duly taken by the law and prosecuted, and indeed in certain cases incarcerated. Now, nature doesn't understand that. Nature is just consistently creating individual human beings. Once upon a time, psychopaths would have been incredibly useful. Back in the day, where a king needed an individual to go out and murder mercilessly without conscience, that psychopath would have found their role a very simple role to fill. So to some degree, you can imagine that nature and evolution takes time to catch up with what we have outmoded from our society. So I think that psychopathy DNA and psychopathy, when I'm talking psychopathy DNA, I'm talking about what we would notably say was serious psychopathic stroke criminal behaviour, not the ones you find in your corporate leadership scenarios.
Of course, yeah.
But those individuals, I think you can imagine the DNA existing and yet it being now outmoded in our society, but nature hasn't figured it out yet. So we keep occasionally creating these blueprints of killer. And I can't see that disappearing. At least in my lifetime, I think they will still be created.
Interesting, but terrifying thought. And for anyone who missed The Killer in My Family, you can catch up right now on UKTV Play, where all episodes are available there to watch.
You don't think that people are capable of it?
I gave him a hug. After that, he went to jail. He was still part of somebody's family.
The remarkable accounts
I'm telling you, he wasn't always bad.
from the people who lived with pure evil.
It could have been me.
The Killer in My Family. Available now with UKTV Play.
So of all the sort of true crime stories and cases, both I guess in the UK and the wider world, are there any in particular that really sort of fascinate or intrigue you, that you just really just stick with you, I guess?
I mean, I think that all cases that I've covered absolutely stick with me. I mean, I remember the names of victims quite easily because I think it's really important to remember them. When I think about the ones that are particularly chilling, there are obviously the big ones that you'd be aware of, you know, Dahmer, Nielsen, all of those. But John Wayne Gacy is somebody who I think on reflection exemplifies the biggest potential fear when I think about a psychopathic, narcissistic serial killer. Because an individual like that was obsessed to some degree with the things that we hold most dear, which is children, for example, and women, and, you know, all the things that we kind of want to protect. He coexisted in society in such a way, even was known in the community as quite a good guy. He's one of those individuals who's a sleeping serpent, so to speak, and he murdered lots and lots of people. But I don't think we probably found out exactly the ramifications of how many people he really murdered. So cases like that are always the ones that make me think, you know, what created that individual and how were we so lax that he didn't get caught in the time frame that he should have been caught, and what is it about a society that can allow somebody like that to coexist almost within a normality in their environment without any questioning, even be seen as somebody that you might invite around for Sunday lunch. And yet they get away with it because their ability to see the world is so skewed through their own conscience that their actions aren't bad in their opinion. That will always be something that sticks to me. You can't say, even when I look at Brady, you know, you read The Gates of Janus, for example, and you're looking at Brady through new eyes, and you sit there and you think to yourself, this is an individual who, till his dying day, required the knowledge that he had power. Like, not telling people where bodies were, you know, not really talking about the ownership of his crimes. It was always about obsessing over power. And even when he could have brought soothing and respite to individuals who deserved it, the delicious context of experiential narcissism, that was more important.
Yeah.
And so I think that what gets me about killers is where I'm left with contempt. And I have contempt for those individuals.
So what first interested you?
It's really nosy.
Sorry, I'm really deep diving here into your background. In the psychology of killers and offenders, was there like a particular moment that stood out for you that just made you really wanted to get under their skin, I guess?
The reality of my work is that I've always come from a victimology perspective. So why do offenders interest me? Because they hurt my victims and the people that I've been working with my entire life. And when you work with clients who've been affected by crime and you work with hope, you always think about the opposite extreme. You think about the darkness that creates the lack of it or the end of it, shall we say. And certainly working with young offenders, which is a part of my work, when I was working with those individuals, I always had a great empathy with what formed them. So as much as we have a monolithic idea of what is good and what is evil, it just isn't true. So I suppose that the combination of those, ultimately caring compassionately and empathically for young people who had been involved in high-level crime and seeing that they were also victims, and then working with people who were indeed victims, that together always creates an interest in the bigger picture, because you want conversations that expand every area of your work. You can't just say that's good, that's bad. You have to think about what creates the imprints of humanity or decreases the imprints of humanity. So I suppose all of that culminated. And also, just from a psychological perspective, when I was a young person, I was sent to a psychologist and remembered finding it really difficult to have conversations with another human being who just seemed to not really understand who I was or what my feelings were. So really what catapulted me into people work and working in the psychological area and therapies was knowing how it is to be on the extreme spectrum of the other side, where you're struggling and people aren't reaching you. So together, healthy interest in thinking I could do it better, a bit of a narcissism in me there, but healthy interest in me thinking I could do it a bit better, having absolute experience with really, really special young men and women who, for the grace of God, were in a terrible situation because of their experiences in life, and being on the side of victims, all of that corroborated and colluded, and I just found myself with the opportunity. I suppose, it's quite unique, I guess, that you've been on both sides of the spectrum in that respect. I think that whatever we do in the psychological therapies, it's always kind of around the belief in humanity. So the only time you're ever really challenged with the belief in humanity is where somebody has bled the life out of other human beings. That's when, with purpose and with choice, they kind of defy the thing that you really understand. So yeah, of course that interests me. It's as far away from who I am and you are as we can imagine.
Absolutely. Are there any ongoing unsolved or infamous cases, I guess, that have really resonated with you? Doesn't need to be, I guess, serial killing or killers. It can be sort of any crime that's really sort of impacted you, I guess.
Personally, the one that will always impact on me more than anything is the McCann case. I had very little children when Madeleine went missing, and I felt like I lived and breathed that daily as a mother. I just felt the rawness of knowing that that child had been taken, or that child had been murdered within an hour and we'll never know, or that child had been sex trafficked, and all those thoughts and feelings and ideas and conversations that you had, and it being still unsolved and it's still being in the press. You can't forget it, nor should we forget it. And the way that as a society we found it wholly impossible to do anything but blame the parents, because it's easier to blame them than to see that the world is crooked and individuals are out there who do horrible things to children. And we have this really weird way of going, you're the villain, when clearly they're not the villain, somebody else is the villain. And that has stayed with me. It's left a bad taste in my mouth. It's left a bad taste in my mouth because society is cruel and we punish people for the greatest pains that they could have ever experienced, and then we torture them because we would have done it differently. I find that is one thing that, ironically, people who think that they are caring, compassionate probably have in relationship and in context with killers, a lack of empathy. And if there's one thing we should all be very, very aware of, is that little darkness that tells us that we're better, we do it differently, they deserve their pain. That's what people like John Wayne Gacy have in bucketfuls.
Yeah, very reminiscent, isn't it? It's almost like that little insight there is so very similar to how they operate, but obviously on a much smaller scale.
Yeah.
Interesting. Has the research that you've done in the past affected the way that you tackle new subjects? Are you constantly sort of, I guess, evolving your techniques on understanding people and the psychology of people?
I mean, I think psychology, you're taught that you're never really an expert in anything, because a new human being walks in with a completely different experience and a completely different set of standards, and they expand your practice and they help you learn and you grow through it. So I think that often you're called expert, for example, and I find that kind of a bit strange, because I certainly don't know everything about everything and anything. But what I think I have managed to do over the years is to cultivate a lovely combination of opportunities. So the media gives me an opportunity to look at lots of cases that I wouldn't ordinarily spend time ruminating over. Working with clients helps me to expand my empathy and consistently work on my compassion, and also reminding myself of the fact that I always believe in hope. I think what's changing, and this is really exciting for me, and yet still is in the early stages, what A Killer in My Family did for me was offer the first opportunity of working in a series where we actually thought about the individual who killed families. We just often like to play, you're good, you're bad, it's black, it's white, and you will never know what it's like to be a killer because they must be really, really terrible human beings. And that's such an incorrect way of looking at it. And when you start bringing it back to, okay, The Killer in My Family, this person had meaning. They were loved, they were cared for, they had children, some of them. They were not these monsters hideously hiding in the back alleys waiting to kill you. That's when we start to really explore and understand. So I think that hopefully we're on the precipice of doing more of that. You know, I want to listen to killers' families. I want to hear the testimony of killers. I want to speak to people who have killed. Because if we do that, maybe we really can do something about preventing subsequent situations that we could have prevented in the past when we look at the typography and profiles of certain killers.
Yeah, I think that was really the bit that stood out for me for The Killer in My Family, and that was such an exciting premise of the show, is that we've never seen that side of things. It's always been the killer, and obviously with respect to the victims and the case overall, but we've never taken that look behind the curtain of who they were associated with, their partners, their mothers, their siblings. And that for me was just such a really interesting insight into where they came from, I guess.
And you come from a completely different angle from me, and yet you have that same interest, which again is so annoying when we look at the monolithism of kind of the criminal activity that we see on television, because it is very much about good, bad. It doesn't work that way. And if we keep peddling a myth where all bad people are like this and all good people are like that, then we miss the most substantial area, which is that most of us have the tenacity to kill. For example, if I ask people a question, would you ever kill anyone? I would say at least 90% of people would be like, no. And you'd all fail a polygraph test, because I'd kill for my children, and I would kill in an instant. If you touched my children in a way where I thought you had harmed them to the point where they could be killed, I would kill you. And I would do it, and I would serve the rest of my life in prison smiling. And I know that people struggle to acknowledge that in them, but it's true.
Yeah.
And people kill for what? We kill. We kill watching the news, validating governments that do it. We do kill. We just don't like to acknowledge it. So when we start expanding that conversation and owning it, that's how we do good. It's from acknowledging the things that we know we could do that give us the empathy to help people who do it. And I think as well, the other side of it is nobody can ever accept that somebody has purposely and willfully gone out and killed someone without feeling resentment, bitterness and hostility to them, of course. However, the idea that men and women are usually born killers, there are people, I genuinely believe that there are people who are born, and no matter what you did, they'd end up doing it. There's something about that bloodiness within them. But the majority don't. They go through life, born into deprivation, tick. Given really bad upbringing, no education, tick. Involved in criminal activity with family, tick. Actively involved in crime with my family in the community as I got older, tick. Low socioeconomic standard, poor diet, poor nutrition, sexual abuse. About 70% of men who believe in prison have been sexually abused. Suddenly, are you as angry with that person, or do we reach out and try to understand? Because that's how you make a difference to the world.
And I think that's the I guess, as you say, the bit that people find it hard to
Swallow.
Yeah, exactly. It's,
Yeah.
you just see that this person's being, no, they're inherently bad, but it's like when you break it down and look into it, it's like obviously not siding with them, but you sort of have to look at, could it have been helped? Like, you know, had their upbringing and their environment been any different, would they have then gone on to do what they did fundamentally?
Exactly. Accountability and responsibility is something a society has to take on. If we create something, we have to own it. It doesn't mean we appreciate that we had an involvement that was direct, but if we accept our responsibility in changing things in the future, we can prevent other children being murdered, for example. And that, when you think about the Bulger case, you see the anger and hostility and aggression. You know, those two boys, you know, I know people who worked with one of those boys, and one of those boys is in a really good place. Now, one of those boys we know was exposed in the press and has therefore never really had the opportunity to grow. And do I think that what they did was acceptable? Absolutely not. My God, what they did was terrible. Do I think adults doing it is worse? Yes. I think an adult killing a child is very much worse, but we don't believe that in our society because children are good.
Yeah.
Let's not be foolish. People are grey area. We are good and bad.
Yeah. Excellent.
But if you touch my children, I'll find you and I will kill you.
Sounds like a Liam Neeson movie.
That is
doesn't
Liam Neeson, absolutely. And I believe that he did follow through.
Yeah.
He killed all of them.
He did, everyone.
Every single one of them. That's exactly it. Let that be a warning to you.
Noted.
Action films, I really.
Do you enjoy being part of this sort of sudden emergence of the interest in true crime? I guess it's become such a huge thing now that I don't want to say it's trendy by any means, but it's one of these things now that people, I think, are a lot more open to voicing that they have an interest in and a fascination with. And why do you think, I guess, it's become so popular in sort of mainstream media?
Well, first of all, I've been involved for 10 years in doing crime documentaries and hosting crime shows. So for me, it isn't new. It's what I've done for 10 years. But it did begin, as you noted, on more secular channels. But there was always a very healthy interest in it. And that spans from the fact that if you look at crime novels, the whole area of novels that sell better than anything is crime. It's as simple as that. We love a good story. We love like triumph over adversity. We love to be voyeuristic. Human beings love peeling back the interest around things that they wouldn't normally have access to. So it doesn't surprise me. It surprises me that we haven't had more of an interest. It surprises me that we haven't done so much more on crime, because the great thing about human beings, and this is one of the things that drives me a bit mad, I don't know about you working in this field, but for me, I think we dumb down the public more than they deserve by a long way. I think the public are so discerning, they're so interested, they're so intelligent, they're so grasping of new information that they just want to find out the intricacies of what makes us human. And you can't know what makes us human without understanding what can at times make us inhuman. So I'm not surprised, I'm thrilled, because the more we talk about the black and white, the more we talk about the grey, and in the end, my dream is that the public will watch a programme where somebody has done the most diabolical things to other human beings, and instead of leaving that programme feeling utter distaste and a separation and a hostility towards the person who carried out the crime, they'll sit quietly and think, we failed them. We really failed them. What can we do better? How can we stop this? So victims don't have to be victims and perpetrators don't have to be perpetrators to that degree. And that's not feeling any empathy for killers. It's feeling a reality of protection for our society. So no, I'm thrilled. Long may it continue, you know, keep me in work, because I love telling stories, and I think that the stories are getting better. I don't think we're as interested in the macabre, dark, this is what happened, this is what they did, this is how many they killed. That's not what people want to hear. It's why. And I think we're getting better at telling those stories.
Yeah, I think, as you say, it's not so much people feeling like a torch-wielding mob now. It's they want to get into the nitty-gritty of, well, why did they do it, and you know, who along the way could have seen something and had a bit more of a hand in preventing what they did. I guess another point is, with so many people talking about true crime, and we're sort of so submerged in that topic now? Do you think to a certain degree people are becoming desensitized to it?
Arguably, desensitisation will always occur to a degree. It's a bit like if you look at pornography. If you look at the light stuff, fine. If you look at the hardcore stuff, then you're going to struggle having sex normally. It's as simple as that. So the more you expose yourself to darkness, of course, and if all you're doing is looking for the darkness, then you will desensitise yourself. However, the thing about true crime is it's not dark. This is the darkness and this is the humanity. So the police officers, the people in court, the people fighting the case against the person who did it, the family of the victim, these people tell their stories. So you might see the darkness and you might hear about the horror, but you also see the feeling that it provokes. And I think that as long as you've got that balance, quite the contrary, I'd say it inspires us to feel more empathy and compassion. If you don't know it's happening, if you don't see it, how can you develop any framework for understanding and compassion? So no, I don't think it desensitises us. But like anything, don't go online and watch horrible things where people are mutilated and murdered, which you can do, unless you want to end up post-traumatic stress disorder, vicarious secondary trauma, or becoming less of a person.
Yeah.
So be careful, always moderate yourself.
Yeah, of course.
You know what's interesting as well, when I think about where we should go, I actually do believe that a great series would interview people who are free, who had killed people or raped people. And people are horrified because they go, oh, well, I want to hear nice stories, or I don't want to think about people being good now. But isn't that really what we should do? And I think crime is still nervous. Crime isn't courageous enough. We should be getting people who've been 10 years out of prison, who live great lives and are open relationships, and they were that killer.
Yeah.
Because then they can tell us firsthand why they did it and why they changed.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I think a lot of people just assume that these people are monsters and they can't be rehabilitated. So that would actually, be a super interesting topic.
And also, people get life sentences, which are 12 years.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And actually not just about those who do horrific killings. You know, people kill in an instinctual moment, but they still kill, they still steal somebody's family, but we don't ask them those questions, and so we can't learn how to prevent it.
Very true. So continuing on and talking about the rise in true crime being such a popular topic, what are your thoughts on, I've seen a lot of people really wanting to solve cases themselves, and I guess there's quite a rise of these at-home detectives who want to solve crimes, and actually a lot of people outside of police forces and things like that who have actually led to crimes being solved. The one that sticks out to me most notably was the Golden State Killer last year. And for me, I just find it fascinating that people can just do this, and all the information is available online. So what are your thoughts, I guess, on that increase?
I mean, I think that we've always had armchair detectives, but what the internet and what access has given us is an opportunity to really involve ourselves and engage ourselves and connect. So what tends to happen is that you will connect with other people who are giving you additional pieces of information through the internet. There are communities online who do this all the time. So of course, that means that that carrot that's dangled in front of you becomes really palpable, and you can do good. I think that there are instances where we see with paedophile vigilantes, those that do it well, i.e. they're not really interested in getting hits on the internet. They want to bring people to justice, give the information across to the police effectively. And then we see the other side, people getting beaten up and people getting harmed and actually not being helpful at all. I think it's a distinction between good social policing, negative social policing. I think that if you really want to contribute, then as long as you're doing it because you feel that you've got value to add, and you're not doing it to just get hits online or to get your social network grown, then power to you.
Yeah.
The police are so overworked. And the other thing about human beings is, one of the things that we have to realise is we live amongst people who are criminals. We live amongst our serial killers, for example. And the instinct that some people have, they can sniff out something that's wrong. So I think that the other side of it is, if you can recognise that natural tenacity and instinct for sniffing out things that aren't right, you probably should be the person trying to do that. I think it's great that people want to get involved.
Yeah, I know, I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know where to start with it myself, but some people I think just really have that knack, as you say, of just grabbing that information and just seeing when something's not right. So we can't obviously talk about true crime without talking about Ted Bundy. who has obviously been very much in the media this year, notably because of the anniversary of his execution. We recently had a documentary on Really about Ted Bundy, and there was, of course, the Netflix documentary that caused a lot of
controversy.
Interest and controversy, exactly. Do you have any opinions or insights about Ted Bundy and the way he acted and the way he, I guess, got away with it for such a long time?
I think when you look at Ted Bundy, he's kind of a standard serial killer, but sadly for the women that he met, he was good looking. We have this really bizarre idea in society that goes, oh, if it looks good, it must be good. It's as simple as that. So if somebody we imagine looks like a serial killer, we're not thinking nice smile, well-spoken, drives a decent car or whatever. We're not thinking like that. So our hackles are down. So what surprised me was the fact that online, you yet again got lots of people almost talking about him in kind of a cult hero type way. I'm not surprised that he was able to coexist in a relationship, that he wasn't necessarily exposing himself as a bad person to the people around him. As time went on, as we see mostly, there is a slip between what I would consider conscious sanity and a beginning of an unravelling into a less sane position. That's when murderers get sloppy or they want to be found out to some degree. What strikes me is that Bundy really could have continued killing for many, many, many years if those mistakes, the sloppiness hadn't have occurred. What doesn't surprise me though is, like I said, that the same thing has stood true throughout time. If somebody seems to be marginally attractive, let's look at Manson for example, marginally attractive, a little bit of charisma maybe, then people will follow and follow even after they've been convicted of the crimes. Even Richard Ramirez with the terrible teeth, because he didn't look like a killer. So it doesn't surprise me there's controversy, it doesn't surprise me there was interest. What does surprise me is that often people think that serial killers are interesting and they tend to be incredibly boring human beings. So don't waste your time writing to those in prison, that's what I'd say.
No, that terrifies me that people do that as well.
And we should probably be questioning why they do. We should probably be saying to ourselves, what is this saying? What is this woman or man doing, writing to this insane individual who's murdered lots of people? What is that saying? Much like we see with the Ian Watkins of the world, people who go out and do horrendous things to children, and women get in touch with them and want to have sex with them or want to converse with them. I mean, they are some people that we should probably be profiling and tracking.
Yeah, that's it. That's just a terrifying, complete other story that, unfortunately we don't have time to get into today,
I've had death threats about that by women who complained about me because of my views on him,
Crikey. So Ted Bundy's Serial Monster is available on UKTV Play to watch now if you missed the series on Really. So moving on, Emma, we've had some fan questions come through on Facebook. So I'm just going to sort of do a bit of a quick fire with you on these, if that's okay. So the first one is from Danielle, and she has said, do you have an opinion you'd be willing to share on the disappearance of Madeleine McCann? So I know we touched on it briefly, but if there's any opinions.
Yeah, I always get abused whenever I say this. I know in my heart, and I know from reading a lot of the evidence, that Jerry and Kate are completely innocent. I don't even feel that they deserve the vitriol online, because the chances are that most of us have done things like left our children for a few minutes. When I was a single mum, I often went to the shop on the corner just up from my house because I was a single mother and got milk. Was I asking for my children to be taken? No, I find the McCann case very emotive, very challenging and very sad, but I find that they're completely innocent on all charges, bar trusting the world.
Hayley from Facebook has asked, who is, in your opinion, the worst offender you've ever come across?
Oh, there isn't a worst. There's only the same kind of level. So as I said, the Bradys, the Gaces, the Ramirez, these kind of individuals. But also for me, because I work with high sexual trauma and sexual abuse, people like Ian Watkins, individuals who are paedophile networks, Jimmy Savile, they really do keep me up at night. They are the ones that keep me up at night because they're prolific, they're consistent, and they are an absolute infection in our society.
Agreed. Christine has asked, what are your thoughts on the recent Jack the Ripper DNA testing that's been in the news?
Well, apparently they've discovered who this individual is. They believe he was a Polish immigrant, from what I can see. I think it's really interesting. What strikes me is the fact that even ridiculous years on, we're still desperate to go, it was this person or it was that person. Whether we can definitively say it, even though the blood was found, it can't necessarily quantify it was that human being, so I don't think we'll ever lay it to rest. Imagine the conspiracy theories now. They're trying to get it away from it being somebody in the royal family, they're trying to get it away from being a surgeon. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there'll always be that conversation, but I love the fact that DNA is the one area now that we're really working on. A guy was arrested just because he was caught for a driving conviction not so long ago. It turned out he'd raped 2 children, 2 women years ago. That's what excites me about technology.
Yeah, the familial DNA and all the ancestry
That's
websites
it.
and things like that. It just
That's it.
sheds so much light, doesn't it, on people that might have otherwise gone completely under the radar.
It's a bit like religion crime, in the fact that on a reductive level you're disproving things and finding things out all the time, and crime's like that because people might be walking free today and they may believe they've got to go away from it, but the truth is it's one step away from being found out, and I like that. I like to hope that killers are in their beds at night and rapists are in their beds at night thinking, goodness me, it's only a matter of time, and it is only a matter of time.
Yeah, they'll all get found out eventually. What do you think about Peter Vronsky's theory that we're able to have another spike of serial killers in the next 25 years?
I think it's quite normal to have those kind of theories, and actually when you look at the statistics regarding it, you can plot these things. So there are different variables, like it could be that we're having a slight depression in our society, there's a period of social unrest, education issues are spiralling out of control, diet and nutrition are becoming problematic. Of course you can do that. And actually in the Western world, we have to remember that we're far better at looking at that kind of profiling. There's a woman in the States who actually spends her entire life just profiling this scatter tests of where different people are killed, and then comes up with theories around the forensics of that individual. So we can see that we're progressing in that way. What I would say is in places like Ukraine and Russia, they're happening all the time. So it's not that they ever go away, it's that we get better at noticing them earlier. So I wouldn't say that he's wrong. I hope we're kind of getting better so that they don't get to serially kill.
Yeah, you'd hope so. You'd hope that we're sort of getting a bit more of a grasp on it now, I guess.
That's the key. And it's getting harder. You know, it really is getting harder to commit crime.
Yeah, hopefully they just don't get smarter. We'll see. Well, that's everything, Emma. Thank you so much for joining us
It's
to
a
talk
pleasure.
true crime today. We've loved having you, and we look forward to seeing you on our screens again very soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you also to our viewers for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed the first episode, and do stay tuned for the rest of the series. We'll be announcing on our social pages when that'll be coming to you. If you do want more true crime discussion, if this has whetted your appetite to talk more about it, head over to Facebook and search Really Crime Scene to find our closed true crime discussion group. That concludes episode 1 of Talking True Crime, and we'll see you next time.